Hey Lions, thanks for joining me again for our read aloud of Wonder. I can't wait to get back into the story. Before we do that, let's take a peek at our plot diagram that we have been filling out together. We almost have filled out all of the important elements of this wonderful novel. We are today, we're going to turn our focus to the conflict. And a conflict is a struggle. It's a problem, it's a struggle that the main character is having in our novel. So, obviously, our main character is Augie, he is the protagonist. And the struggles, you can have internal struggles or external struggle, internal conflict or external conflict. An example of this would be, let's stick with the Star Wars example. So the Jedi's versus the Sith. That's an external struggle that these two forces have, and they have conflict and they're constantly battling each other. And one of the movies, I forget which, but what is his name? Anakin Skywalker, who turns into Darth Vader. He had an internal conflict. It was a struggle he had within himself, because he was fighting against good versus evil until eventually the evil took over and he became Darth Vader. So the struggle or the conflict could be with yourself, or it could be with others, perhaps other characters. So we'll continue developing the idea of conflict. But if we think specifically about the novel Wonder, the conflict, so what is the struggle that Augie has over and over again? I can make a case for an external conflict and that people treat him differently because of his facial differences. But I wonder, um, you know, I really think there's an internal struggle in that Augie has to love himself and accept himself, for who he is. Because there were many times throughout the book he would hold his head down and he was afraid to make eye contact with people. And I think that's an internal struggle he's having. He needs to love himself and realize that all of us are worthy. And so I really believe there's an internal struggle here. So let me zoom in. And so let me go over here to the conflict. Oops, I'm moving the text box without even meaning to. So I oh, here we go. So Augie, or we'll say due to facial differences, due to facial differences, and I'm going to say facial slash medical, because he ended up having hearing aids, which he was really self-conscious about wearing at first, but then I'm so glad he realized how wonderful it was, um, and that he thought it was going to be this horrible thing, and it ended up not being so bad. In fact, it improved his quality of life. So we're going to say, due to facial medical differences, Augie does not have self-confidence. Let's see. I'll say in some circumstances. Because not always, sometimes he's very confident and but it's like it would always come back to him feeling some degree of not being quite as worthy as other people. I have a feeling by the time we get to the end of the novel, we're going to see a transformation. Think about so far in this novel how much growth and change there's been in Augie. First he was terrified to start school, but he wanted to, and he knew it was the right thing to do. And now he's getting ready to go off to camp. It's his first time he'll be sleeping away ever. So, not even an entire school year has passed, and Augie has already made such a transformation. So I can't wait to see what happens by the end of the novel. And it looks like I spelled this wrong. There we go. So I think the conflict, remember, the conflict is the struggle the main character's having. And so I wrote, due to facial medical differences, Augie does not have self-confidence in some circumstances. Okay, let's go ahead and read to find out what happens next. So if you remember, Augie was packing for sleepaway camp, and he, without his mom knowing, took out Babu, the stuffed animal, and left it on his bed with a note to his mom. So he had the dream about Daisy, that his dog was there right before he left, and it just gave him confidence that she would be watching over him. Okay, day one. The bus ride went really fast. I sat by the window and Jack was next to me in the aisle seat. Summer and Maya were in front of us. Everyone was in a good mood. Kind of loud, laughing a lot. I noticed right away that Julian wasn't on our bus, even though Henry and Miles were. I figured he must be in the other bus, but then I overheard Miles tell Amos that Julian ditched the grade trip because he thought the whole nature retreat thing was quote unquote dorky. I got totally pumped because dealing with Julian for 3 days in a row and 2 nights was a major reason that I was nervous about this whole trip. So now without him there, I could just really relax and not worry about anything. We got to the nature reserve at around noon. The first thing we did was put our stuff down in the cabins. You know what? I want to pause for a minute because I want to add to the conflict. When Augie just said that one of the reasons he was nervous about the trip was because of Julian, that's, we're almost at the end of the novel, and that's still weighing heavily on him. So I'm going to add that on here. So I think there's an internal struggle that Augie doesn't feel quite as worthy because of his differences. But then also there is an external struggle with Julian. So we'll say, and Julian bullies him because of these differences. And let me make this font smaller so we can actually see it. It wrote over top of the next text box. Let's try this and see what happens. No, a little smaller still. Okay. So, due to facial and medical differences, Augie does not have self-confidence in some circumstances, and Julian bullies him because of these differences. So I think that better explains it. The internal and external struggle. So, but you see how the text evidence, I'm using the clues from the text to determine what the struggle is. So as long as you can justify your answer with text evidence, your answer is not going to be wrong. It can be up for discussion because people can interpret it differently. Okay, here I go again. Okay, so he said, now without him there, I could really just relax and not worry about anything. We got to the nature reserve at around noon. The first thing we did was put our stuff down in the cabins. There were three bunk beds to every room. So me and Jack did rock, paper, scissors for the bunk, and I won. Woohoo! And the other guys in the room were Reed and Tristan and Pablo and Nino. After we had lunch in the main cabin, we all went on a 2-hour guided nature hike through the woods. But these were not woods like they have in Grand Central Park. These were real woods, giant trees that almost totally blocked out the sunlight, tangles of leaves and fallen tree trunks, howls and chirps, and really loud bird calls. There was a slight fog, too, like a pale blue smoke all around us. So cool. The nature guide pointed everything out to us. The different types of trees we were passing, the insects inside the dead logs, the signs of deer and bears in the wood. Oh my. What types of birds were whistling and where to look for them. I realized that my low hearing aids actually made me hear better than most people because I was usually the first person to hear a new bird call. It started to rain as we headed back to camp. I put on my rain poncho and pulled the hood up so my hearing aids wouldn't get wet. But my jeans and shoes got soaked by the time we reached our cabins. Everyone got soaked. It was fun, though. We had a wet sock fight in the cabin. Ooh, I bet that was stinky. Since it rained for the rest of the day, we spent most of the afternoon goofing off in the rec room. They had a ping pong table, an old-style arcade game like Pac-Man and Missile Command that we played until dinner time. Luckily, by then it had stopped raining, so we got to have our real campfire cookout. The log benches around the campfire were still a little damp, but we threw our jackets over them and hung out by the fire, toasting s'mores and eating the best roasted hot dogs I've ever tasted. Mom was right about the mosquitoes. There were tons of them. But luckily, I had spritzed myself before I left the cabin, and I wasn't eaten alive like some of the other kids were. Good thing you listened to his mom. I loved hanging out by the campfire after dark. I loved the way bits of fire dust would float up and disappear into the night air, and how the fire lit up people's faces. I loved the sound the fire made, too, and how the woods were so dark that you couldn't see anything around you, and you'd look up and see a billion stars in the sky. I've seen it look like that in Montauk, though, like someone sprinkled salt on a shiny black table. I was so tired when I got back to the cabin that I didn't need to pull out a book to read. I fell asleep almost as fast as my head hit the pillow, and maybe I dreamed about the stars. I don't know. The Fairgrounds. The next day was just as great as the first day. We went horseback riding in the morning, and in the afternoon we rappelled up some ginormous trees with the help of the nature guides. By the time we got back to the cabin for dinner, we were all really tired again. After dinner, they told us we had an hour to rest, and then we were going to take a 15-minute bus ride to the fairgrounds for an outdoor movie night. I hadn't had the chance to write a letter to Mom and Dad and Via yet, so I wrote one telling them about all the stuff we did that day and the day before. I pictured myself reading it to them out loud when I got back, since there was just no way the letter would get home before I did. When we got to the fairgrounds, the sun was just starting to set. It was about 7:30. The shadows were really long on the grass, and the clouds were pink and orange. It looked like someone had taken sidewalk chalk and smudged the colors across the sky with their fingers. It's not that I haven't seen nice sunsets before in the city, because I have. Slivers of sunsets between buildings, but I wasn't used to seeing so much sky in every direction. Out here in the fairgrounds, I could understand why ancient people used to think the world was flat and the sky was a dome that closed in on top of it. That's what it looked like from the fairgrounds, in the middle of this huge open field. Because we were the first school to arrive, we got to run around the field all we wanted until the teachers told us it was time to lay out our sleeping bags on the ground and get good viewing seats. We unzipped our bags and laid them down like picnic blankets on the grass in front of the giant movie screen in the middle of the field. Then we went to the row of food trucks parked on the edge of the field to load up on snacks and sodas and stuff like that. There were concession stands there too, like in a farmer's market, selling roasted peanuts and cotton candy. And up a little farther was a short row of carnival-type stalls, the kind where you can win a stuffed animal if you throw a baseball into a basket. Jack and I both tried and failed to win anything, but we heard Amos won a yellow hippo and gave it to Jimena. That was gossip that went around. The jock and the brainiac. From the food trucks, you could see the corn stalks and back of the movie screen. They covered about a third of the entire field. The rest of the field was completely surrounded by woods. As the sun sank lower in the sky, the tall trees at the entrance to the woods looked dark blue. By the time the other school buses pulled into the parking lots, we were back in our spots on our sleeping bags, right smack in front of the screen. The best seats in the whole field. Everyone was passing around snacks and having a great time. Me and Jack and Summer and Reed and Maya played Pictionary. We could hear the sounds of the other schools arriving, the loud laughing and talking of kids coming out on the field on both sides of us, but we really couldn't see them. Though the sky was still lit, the sun had gone down completely, and everything on the ground had turned a deep purple. The clouds were shadows now. We had trouble even seeing the Pictionary cards in front of us. Just then, without any announcement, all the lights at the ends of the field went on at once. They were like bright, big stadium lights. I thought of that scene in Close Encounters when an alien ship lands and they're playing that music. Da-da, da-doo-dum. I'm not quite sure I did that right. Everyone in the field started applauding and cheering like something great had just happened. Okay, next chapter is called Be Kind to Nature. An announcement came over the huge speakers next to the stadium lights. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the 23rd annual Big Movie Night at the Broarwood Nature Reserve. Welcome teachers and students from MS 342, the William Heath School. A big cheer went up on the left side of the field. Welcome teachers and students from Glover Academy. Another cheer went up, this time from the right side of the field. And welcome teachers and students from the Beecher Prep School. Our whole group cheered as loudly as we could. We're thrilled to have you here as our guests here tonight and thrilled that the weather is cooperating. In fact, can you believe what a beautiful night it is? Again, everyone hooped and hollered. So as we prepare the movie, we do ask that you take a few moments to listen to this important announcement. The Broarwood Nature Reserve, as you know, is dedicated to preserving our natural resources and the environment. We ask that you leave no litter behind. Clean up after yourselves, be kind to nature, and it will be kind to you. We ask that you keep that in mind as you walk around the grounds. Do not venture beyond the orange cones at the edges of the fairgrounds. Do not go into the cornfields of the woods. Please keep the free roaming to a minimum. Even if you don't feel like watching the movie, your fellow students may feel otherwise. So please be courteous. No talking, no playing music, no running around. The restrooms are located on the other side of the concession stands. After the movie is over, it will be quite dark, so we ask that all of you stay with your schools as you make your way back to your buses. Teachers, there's usually at least one lost party on big movie nights at Broarwood. Don't let it happen to you. Tonight's movie presentation will be The Sound of Music. I immediately started clapping, even though I'd seen it a few times before, because it was Via's favorite movie of all time. But I was surprised that a whole bunch of kids, not from Beecher, booed and hissed and laughed. Someone from the right side of the field even threw a soda can at the screen, which seemed to surprise Mr. Tushman. I saw him stand up and look in the direction of the can thrower, though I knew he couldn't see anything in the dark. The movie started playing right away. The stadium lights dimmed. Maria the nun was standing at the top of the mountain, twirling around and around. It had gotten chilly all of a sudden, so I put on my yellow Montauk hoodie and adjusted the volume on my hearing aids and leaned against my backpack and started watching. The hills are alive. The next chapter is called The Woods Are Alive. Somewhere around the boring part were the guy named Rolf and the oldest daughter singing, "You are 16 going on 17. Jack nudged me. "Dude, I've got to pee," he said. We both got up and kind of hopscotched over the kids who were sitting or lying down on the sleeping bags. Summer waved as we passed by, and I waved back. There were lots of kids from the other schools walking around by the food trucks, playing the carnival games, or just hanging out. Of course, there was a huge line for the toilets. "Forget this. I'll just find a tree," said Jack. "That's gross, Jack. Let's just wait," I answered. But he headed off to the row of trees at the edge of the field, which was past the orange cones that we were specifically told not to go past. This does not sound like a good idea. I have a feeling it's not going to end well. Always listen to the adults. Okay, where are we? And of course, I followed him. Oh no, disaster number 2. And of course, we didn't have our flashlights because we forgot to bring them. It was so dark now, we literally couldn't see 10 steps ahead of us as we walked toward the woods. Luckily, the movie gave off some light. So when we saw a flashlight coming toward us out of the woods, we knew immediately there was Henry, Miles, and Amos. I guess they hadn't wanted to wait in line to use the toilets either. Miles and Henry were still not talking to Jack. But Amos had let go of the war a while ago, and he nodded hello to us as they passed by. "Be careful of the bears," shouted Henry, and he and Miles laughed as they walked away. Amos shook his head at us like, "Don't pay attention to them." Jack and I walked a little further until we were just inside the woods. Then Jack hunted around for the perfect tree and finally did his business, though it felt like he was taking forever. The woods were loud with strange sounds and chirps and croaks, like a wall of noise coming out of the trees. Then we started hearing loud snaps not far from us, almost like cap gun pops that definitely weren't insect noises. And far away, like in another world, we could hear raindrops on roses and whiskers on kittens. "Ah, that's much better," said Jack. "Now I have to pee," I said, which I did on the nearest tree. No way I was going farther in like Jack did. "Do you smell that? Like firecrackers," he said, coming over to me. "Oh, yeah, that's what that is," I answered. "Weird. Let's go." The next chapter is called Alien. Ooh, I can't wait to get into that chapter. Okay, so let's review. So we looked at the conflict today. Remember, conflict is the struggle that the main character is having. Conflicts can be internal, kind of like Anakin Skywalker in Star Wars, when he had that internal struggle of doing good versus evil. Or a conflict can be external, like the Jedis versus the Sith, when you're thinking about Star Wars. And so in our story, Wonder, I believe there's an internal and external struggle. Part of the internal struggle was that because of the facial differences that Augie had, he didn't have self-confidence in some circumstances. And it made him not feel as worthy, which we know is never true for anyone. We are all worthy, especially at New Midway Woodsboro. Every single one of us is worthy always, no matter what. Our differences make us better. And then there was an external struggle because Julian bullies Augie because of his differences. So poor Augie, internally just didn't feel good about himself. But then he also, on top of that, had Julian who bullied him consistently because of those differences. So I can't wait, and as we continue, that that we can see more in the falling action, and how this conflict gets resolved. That's a good thing about most stories, is the big problem usually gets resolved. And I can't wait until we see all of the falling action that occurs to help resolve that conflict. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you right back here tomorrow to continue our read aloud. We're getting close to the end, guys, and one way I'm excited to find out how the novel ends, but then another I'm so sad, because and then that means this wonderful book is over. But that's okay, we'll find another one. All right, Lions, I'll see you tomorrow.